Howdy folks, today we're going to talk drones, portraits, and how to get started in the photography industry right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. We spend literally hundreds of hours interviewing some of the most renowned photographers of our time. In fact, and I mentioned this last week, it was 209,233 seconds in 2023 alone. That's nuts. That's a lot of hours. In fact, get your calculators out and message me to let me know how many, because, whoever gets back to me with the right answer will get a special mention on the show. Promise. Anywho, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and before we get into it, I've got one thing to ask of you. I've noticed that over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners in audio are not actually subscribed to this channel. You can really help us out by hitting that subscribe button. It'll help us get even more amazing guests on the show. Just one click, it'll take a mere second. Thank you so much. Without further ado though, let's give it up for today's special guest, all the way from Bristow, Oklahoma. Give it up for drone, family, and portrait photographer, Andy Horton. Andy, man, how are things?
Awesome, man. How are you?
I'm very good. Now, what people don't know is that it took me about 5 or 6 different attempts to get my words together for this intro. But, editing software, good thing. Anyway,
absolutely.
Good to have you on the show, man.
Good to be here.
Eddie, I mentioned in the intro, you started with drone photography, and then you set yourself up as a family and portrait photographer over in Oklahoma. So let's talk about drones first, because that's super interesting. And then what we'll do is we'll get to how to actually make the transition from doing photography as a hobby into a business in a little while. But let's start with drones, because we like talking drones. Always interesting. How did you get started with drones and drone photography?
So at the time, this is back in 2010, 2011. I was working overseas with a robotics company, and a lot of the technology that we used was remote control. And that same technology stepped over into drones. So I was automatically interested in drones because I basically did drones for a living. I just did them inside a pipe. And so at the time, you couldn't really buy a lot of off-the-shelf drones that were any good. You had to pretty much build your own. So I started buying kits and building my own. This is before the Phantom really became a big thing. And at that time, there was no gimbal stabilized footage or anything. You just stuck the camera to the drone and your footage was just herky jerky. No matter where you pointed the drone, that's the way the camera pointed. It wasn't smooth. It looked horrible. I thought it was the best thing ever. But now I look back at that old footage and it's awful. It's terrible. But, I started doing that for the sake of having fun, and, of course, got the neighbors involved, and, we did all sorts of really stupid stuff with drones and crashed them all over the countryside. And, over time, I started building my own gimbal stabilized, cameras, and basically just making a motorized gimbal, attaching a GoPro to that and stabilizing it. And, there was a lot of tuning and stuff involved that it took up a massive amount of time. I mean, if you had to do that today commercially, it just really wouldn't be worth the time that you would invest to do that. But at the time it was fun. And, I got approached by a couple of people that wanted me to do that, for their video production. And, at that time, that was when there was a lot of, I want to say confusion. It was an odd regulatory period, for drones at that time. That was when they were trying to do what was called an exemption 333, where you had to basically have a light sport pilot's license, to commercially fly a drone. And so it took a lot of jumping through hoops to do that. I was already an aircraft mechanic. I'd actually already got that license, and I'd already had ground school. So it wasn't it wasn't horrible. It was a bit of an expense to do it, but so I did that. I flew drones for a few people, and they were shooting all the footage on the ground, and they were doing interviews and stuff like that. And I thought, well, if I could do that too, then maybe I could, be the one-stop shop and not just be the drone guy. I could be the video guy. And so I started looking at cameras. Well, at that time, this was probably like 2013, like maybe a little later than that. The biggest bang for your buck in a camera to do 4K footage at that time that I could find was like a Sony mirrorless, a really small body, a crop camera. So I picked one of those up and I started shooting videos with it. And I was doing events and promotional videos, and the area that I live in, there are a lot of like rodeo, equestrian, that kind of thing. We have stuff out here in Oklahoma and Arkansas that's chuck wagon racing, which is the gnarliest like equestrian sport that you'll ever see in your life. It's crazy, and I still do stuff for them. But I got involved in that with videos, and I went to an event, and at that time, I mean, I literally think the shutter count on my camera, because it was a mirrorless camera, I could totally take photos with that camera. I think the shutter count was 0. And I showed up to this event, and at that time, and still I do a lot of stuff on a handshake. No contract, I know people will scream at me for this, but I show up, and basically the client looks at me and says, "We've decided we're not going to use your video." I'm like, "But you let me show up. Like, I'm here with all of my equipment. What am I supposed to do?" And so, I was there, and I thought, well, I'll take photos, and I'll just see. I'm just going to play with my camera and take photos and see what happens. And the camera that I had was, I think that was the Sony A6300 at that time, and it had the first, like, the imaging edge. I don't even know if it was called imaging edge at that time. I can't remember what it was called, but it was the predecessor to that or something. It was on my phone, and you could transfer images from your camera to your phone. And I was thinking like a videographer. My camera settings and stuff, like now, if I looked at that, there's no way I would use those settings. I was thinking, 180 rule. And I thought when I sped my shutter speed up to like 500th of a second or something, it was super fast. So it was not even, I had no clue what I was doing. Took a few photos, transferred them to my phone. I happened to have one of the contestants' phone numbers, and I just sent some photos to him. And I said, "Hey, here's a few photos. If any of the other competitors are interested, I'm set up on this corner on the track, and I'm taking pictures." And there was a warmer response to that than what I thought there would be. And at that time, it felt like instant gratification, because I didn't have to go home and spend 2 hours per minute of edited footage to deliver a product. It was just, here's your photos. So when someone asks me when my photography career started, I can tell them to the hour. I can tell them that it was 2017, July 10th at 1 p.m. is exactly when that happened. So, because it was just, it was over. I mean, I've still done some video projects and stuff since then, but I knew I was going to take pictures after that. It's funny because I liked it at the time because I wasn't spending a lot of time editing, and now I'm spending a massive amount of time editing. So that's a bit ironic. But I think the more that I worked, the less I did video, the more I did photos. And then the more that I did photos too, like the less I flew drones. Like, I still do it every once in a while, but that's a very, very minor thing. I went through the whole 107 licensing process and all of that stuff, but I have like maybe a couple of big events that cause me to keep that up to date, but 90% of my work now is all photography. But one thing I will, and I probably should have said this before we started, I still do quite a bit of event work, and I even work with a couple of other photographers that do really large equestrian event like barrel racing, stuff like that. I was on the phone with one this morning before we started talking about an event we've got coming up, which is BBR Worlds, which BBR is Better Barrel Races. And in Oklahoma City, they'll have an event coming up in April that there'll be about 2,000 contestants there. And they'll be running 3 different arenas at the same time, and we'll be photographing all of that all at once. So we'll probably shoot somewhere in the neighborhood of about 150,000 photos in about 3 or 4 days. So, and all of that will be cataloged, and you'll be able to look that up under your name. So that's an interesting feat. That's not my doing. That's a friend of mine and her programming friend that have developed their own software that does that, and it's extremely impressive. But yeah, as far as transitioning from, I guess, doing it as a hobby, I mean, it's a similar story. I mean, I kind of accidentally fell into photography, but I've heard this a lot from other photographers, and it's kind of true to me too. Is that at some point you're going to keep doing it for fun, and at some point your work will get to the point where someone's going to want it, and somebody's going to ask you to take a portrait for them or something to that effect. I had, and it's usually a relative. I had a cousin that was graduating from high school and wanted to do his senior pictures, and reached out to me, and so I did those, and of course, they get posted to Facebook or social media, and then someone else says, who was that photographer? And it kind of goes from there. And then you can stumble into a side hustle without even realizing that you have a side hustle. You can just start doing it and, I guess in my case, I kind of had a bit of it was more of I fell off of a cliff more than a nudge. I was on a job overseas. I came home on vacation with my folks, and we took a trip to Colorado, and my mother had a heart attack and passed away out there on vacation with us. I found her in our camper. And so that was, as you can imagine, devastating for not only me, but especially my dad. And, we came home from that. I tried to go back to work overseas. I was worried sick because, mom and dad had been together for, 60 years. So he's on a 107-acre ranch out here. And so I was worried sick about him, and not having a great time on the job overseas. And finally it was kind of a push came to shove, and I was like, I'm done. And I had, at that time, a bit of a cushion to fall on. I'd saved up, a decent amount of money doing those jobs overseas. And so I came back home, and one thing led to another. I picked up a camera, and I just kind of went for it full blast. I eat, sleep, breathe it. I don't do anything else. I'm not even sure I'm employable at this point.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying. There's a number of really interesting points that you made. I mean, let's start with, you were talking about shooting an equestrian event, and then basically just saying, okay, well, here are the photos, if you want them, like, there they are, and like sharing your photos. Now, I always think, especially in the beginning, that's a really good way of getting noticed and getting your name out there into the community, just generally, is to basically just start by, attracting attention by giving your work away for free. And people often say that, in a business sense, it's like, you don't do anything for free. Well, actually, in the beginning, this might not necessarily be the worst thing, because then all of a sudden people know that that's what you do, and I often feel that, the more you give, the more you receive in sort of a, traditional sense, whatever. But
absolutely,
you know what I'm saying. It's a really good way to start, and just to pick an event, like for instance, an equestrian event, like where you live, or it could be like a sports event around here. There's plenty of sports events, whether it could be dirt bike racing. It could be.
I've done a lot of that.
I'm near London, and there are plenty of equestrian events around here. They're a little bit more formal, usually here, but the British traditional horse riding thing. But but there's plenty of. I mean, it could be an athletics event. It could be whatever, like a car event or whatever. Actually, in fact, car events are beautiful. I have a friend who owns a Ferrari, and he doesn't actually have that much money. It sounds pretty grandiose for somebody else. I think he's put his life savings into this car, but
right.
But but he's just really into it, and so he's a part or a member of like lots of these Ferrari owners clubs and stuff like that, and so he takes part in those. They go on drives and they showcase their cars and whatever. And I accompanied him a few times. And obviously, I took photos. Clearly, I mean, there's lots of cool cars around, so why wouldn't I?
Absolutely.
And, and really the thing is that when you're a car owner, you're really proud of your car. And so having somebody, offer you photos of your car, I mean, you're going to take that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a really great way of, of getting to know people in that arena, basically. And so that's it's a great way to get to that point where eventually somebody's going to come back to you and say like, hey, I'm going to give you hard cash for you to take photos. And at that point you're in business.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
The minute somebody pays you to get you to do photographs, that is it. And then, you can expand from there. So that's a really good way of getting into it. But as always, you're going to have to give something in order to receive something back eventually. It's how I always feel with those things.
Oh, yeah. And I don't think everybody wants to stop doing that. They always say, oh, you shouldn't work for free. But I don't really necessarily see it that way, because I think some of my biggest self-advertisement, I get a lot of high school seniors. That's what I like to do. I love doing, because it's one-on-one. And they always want to do something cool. Like it's not the typical family group shot where pretty much all you can do is, put a light in a certain spot to not cast shadows on their faces and everyone look at me and smile and hope like crazy everybody's eyes are open. It's that one-on-one, and you can get them to do crazy things, and they want to take sports athletics type photos and stuff. But the way that I get a lot of those is I'll show up to a football game. Or I'll show up to a softball game and I'll just take some cool photos and post them on, I'll send them to the coach or, whatever. And I'll make sure the parents get them. And, I've gotten a lot of high school senior bookings just doing that, because they didn't, I mean, if you don't go out and get in front of the public eye somewhat, they don't know you're there. They have no idea you exist, and you can take the best photos on planet Earth, but no, it's not going to do you any good if nobody knows about it. So I think, you need to do a certain amount of, I'm not going to say it's free work exactly, but you have to put work out there somehow, and you're not going to get a paying gig every 5 minutes, every second. I mean, you still need to produce something for someone to see. So
do you have to produce something that somebody loves, or at least likes very much, and this is exactly the thing. Like going to a sports game, going to an event where people come together because they're really into something that they love, like a car event, for example, or an equestrian event, or something like that, then, photographing that will actually mean something to those people. And the thing about about free work. I hear this all the time as well. Like people are saying, "Oh, you shouldn't work for free," blah blah blah, because it undermines the whole industry and all that kind of, all that kind of stuff.
No, it does.
I mean, this, there's to an extent, there's probably some truth to that, but, and it's the big but. Generally, I say I don't work for free. This is true, except I work a lot for free. The difference is I decide when I want to work for free. So, in other words, like, you know what it's like. I mean, I used to have a career in music before I got into photography, and I'm a guitar player. So you know what it's like. Like, you play the guitar, somebody comes up to you and he goes like, "Hey man, you're really good at playing the guitar. Oh, thank you, man. Oh, do you want to come to my party? Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Oh, but make sure you bring your guitar because it'd be awesome, to hear you play." And like, well, but now, so what, do you want to hire me? Like, is that a thing?
Right.
Or you just want me to show up and play for your other guests? Because that's not what I do, because I still have to, pay the rent and, keep my kids in Netflix and all that kind of stuff, It's not gonna, I just, and it's exactly the same in a way with photography, It's like, oh yeah, and he's got a great camera. He's got a professional camera.
Right.
It's got a big lens and it's black, so it must be professional. But, do you want to come along to my birthday party and shoot that? Because, do you know what I mean? I mean, it's the same in photography. And generally speaking, when I'm asked to do something for free, my immediate, and this may sound horrible, but my immediate reaction is usually to say no.
Right.
Unless there's a particular, what's the best word? I don't know. Unless there's a particular thing or purpose that I feel that I can serve.
Right.
Or it's something I really want to do. Of course, then I'll do it. Or it's usually something where I think, oh, actually, this might be a cool thing to do. I want to do it, and I want to, I want to help, and I want to be part of it, and I want to give my work away for free.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah.
So actually, I end up doing a lot of stuff for free. It's just that I always feel like I want to be in the driving seat when I make those decisions. Because I wouldn't ask the neighbor's gardener to come over and mow my lawn for free.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and I guess I should clarify on that as well, because and I've gotten those inquiries before where it was, oh, I've got however many 100,000 Instagram followers, and if you come do this for me for free, then you'll get all of this exposure, and you'll get, the word exposure is the most horrible word I think I've ever heard. But yeah, I turn down stuff like that all the time.
But that's what I always say. Like, I used to say this when I used to be in the music industry. I used to say, like, yeah, I mean, the minute I can pay my rent with exposure, I'm game.
Yeah.
Also, pay my gas bill, with exposure, 100%. How much is it worth?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they all want cash money, and so I got to somehow, make sure I earn that money. It's one of these things. But yeah, I mean, I really do believe in giving, and in order to receive, you're going to have to give, and I do feel that's very important. So I actually support a lot of causes that I will do free work, and often, I mean, this is one of the sort of topics that I think I've talked about on this podcast a lot, where sometimes you just feel that somebody could really do with your skill. And, sometimes there are situations where you feel like I can actually really make a difference here. That's, a good example is, a while ago, a friend of mine, his business wasn't doing necessarily that well, and it was really very apparent that he needed rebranding, but he really didn't have the funds to fund all that. And I kind of thought, you know what, I can help you out. Like, I can shoot some headshots and stuff like that, and to help you out with this, because I really think that you deserve the help, Yeah. And that's a whole different thing. I gladly keep my skill for free in that sort of instance. But this, again, coming back to events and things, and creating photography for people who will really love it, will get your name out there, and And that's actually good. I mean, a good example. I see this all the time. You know, when I do a headshot session, more often than not, I will have somebody go like, "Oh, I have to bring my kids over, you know, because I'd really love like a family portrait." I don't really advertise family portraits. It's not really something that you'll find on my website.
Right.
But I'm absolutely 100% happy to do it, and not necessarily for free. But you know, it's these sort of conversations come up in the context of photography, you know, and so more often than not, one thing leads to another thing, and then before you know it, it leads to another thing that will actually pay your rent.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's a lot of, I think to a lot of people it's black and white, you know, that I don't work for free, and I think there's a lot more nuance to that than what people give it. And yeah, and I'm not saying just do anything anyone wants for nothing. But and I think you really got it when you need to do it on your terms. Like it needs to not be just whoever wants you to do something, you just go do it. And I think, you know, there's multiple reasons. And like you said, helping a good cause, you know, I mean, if you want to help somebody, help them. I mean, that's your choice. And I don't think you should have to explain that to anybody. And also, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
What goes around comes around. That's how I look at it. You know,
yeah,
it's like you help somebody out. At some point, you might be the one who needs to help, and things come full circle. You know, that's
right.
And especially when you're just starting out. Like, let's say, for instance, you know, you really have fun taking pictures. You think you're getting pretty good at it, and you're thinking, oh, maybe this might be a way to create a side hustle, for example. So really, I think it's a typical situation where people have, you know, a job, and then maybe they can think, oh, well, you know, actually, maybe you can make some extra money with photography. You know, and then it's just a thing of like, well, how do I get started? And doing exactly this, giving work for free, you know, helping other people, getting your name out there, that's very often just the perfect stepping stone for that.
Yeah.
So how did you get from like equestrian photography then into doing family portraits? Was it just a matter of like people asking, or how did that develop to start with? Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps.
More or less, yeah. Like I said, you know, I had a family member that had a son that was graduating high school and wanted photos done, and so I did that, and I actually I put a thing out, and I said, hey, I'm looking for a family that, you know, wants their family portraits done. I won't charge you anything, but I want to be able to use them for, you know, and so I had a family come out, and I still work with that family. I did their family photos again this year, and, you know, and charged my normal rate. So, I mean, it works out. But they came out, I did their portraits, which, you know, it's another one of those things that was just getting started. And I think I shot like group photos at like f1.8 or something or whatever. You know, they're like the kid in the front row was perfectly sharp, and then everybody else was completely out of focus. But it got me started, and it got me something to put out there. And I think that might touch on another aspect is I see this a lot. and photographers that have become good friends of mine, and they won't put their work out there, and they won't start charging, or they won't get into business until they think their work is technically perfect. And I think that's a big mistake. I think people say, well, you shouldn't charge money for work that's not up to a commercial standard, which, I mean, to an extent, I can understand that. But at the same time, you know, when you start, you're not charging, you know, top level. And that's the other thing that I see too. I see people that they say, you know, don't start at a low rate because you'll never be able to raise your rate. I don't really agree with that. I think the thing that you see is that when you charge $100, you get $100 clients. And then when you raise your price to $500, you're going to lose those clients, and you need to be ready to do that. And you need to be ready to go find the $500 client. And then when you go to 1,000, the same thing's going to happen. I think that maybe people don't understand that you're kind of starting from scratch in a way. Every time you raise a rate like that, you might retain a few, but most of them you won't. And
that is so important. Like, this is what I've been preaching for years, really. You know?
Yeah.
And this is so true. The client that will pay $60 for a headshot is a very different client from the client that will pay $500.
Absolutely.
For a headshot. Completely different people. And so these people are, you know, those different clients are obviously in different places. They might be in different professions, you know, they might live in different parts of town, whatever it is. But, you know, as you grow your skill, as a photographer, you also have to grow your skill as a, you know, business owner in a sense. And you're going to have to, what's the word? What is the word I'm looking for? You're going to have to reconfigure your business to, you know, to attract the type of client that you want to attract. And the same thing is true in the wedding industry, for example. You know, the same thing is true with headshots. And so on and so forth. It really is important to really think about the kind of client that you want to attract with the work that you're putting out. You got to start. I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and you're not going to start at the top. So I mean, the idea that you're going to jump out there, I guess that you're going to take photos in your basement for 5 years until you're the best ever, and then you're going to immediately enter the scene at a top level price. You know, I see people that think they're going to do that, which, I mean, I'm not saying you can't. I mean, it's possible, but I think your propensity to learn your craft, and I can think of a photographer that I will get yelled at immediately for saying this, but there's no avoiding that you will learn things on the job. Like you're going to learn some stuff while you're working. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't practice. You should absolutely find somebody that's willing to come help you. If you're a portrait photographer, you need somebody to show up and model for you every now and then, and you need to practice as much as you can. But you're still going to learn some stuff when you do the job. And if you're not putting yourself out there and doing the job, I think that's a disservice to yourself. I think you need to get out there, do it, put the work out. Don't worry about whether you're at that top level yet. I mean, just put something out there and get that lower tier customer. Well, that sounds derogatory, but I don't mean it that way. But get that cheaper client and do the work and put that out there and build on it and build your skills while you're doing it. And then, go through that process of when you raise your prices, you're going to have to find different clients. And I'm doing that now. I mean, I'm not an expensive, I'm nowhere near some of the people that you've had on this podcast. I looked at your Instagram clips before and I went, what am I doing on here? But I'm not comparing myself and what I expect to charge for that yet. And I don't really have a problem with that. I don't have an issue with where I'm at as far as what I charge, but obviously I want to get better. I want to make more, but still, yeah.
And the thing is also, it's a very basic sort of principle in business, just generally. And I'll use an example from my past. Many years ago, I've talked about this many times, but I used to be, I think I mentioned earlier, I used to be a musician. I guess I'm always a musician, but I used to be a professional musician, as in like this used to be my main income. And I remember, when I graduated from college, I used to do lots of session work. But the problem with music in general is that you have to have your fingers in lots of different pies. As I say, you do some session work, some recordings, you get paid for that, but it's not like a 9-to-5 job. Sometimes you have some sessions coming in, sometimes you don't, and you still have to pay the same amount of rent. So you're going to have to find different income streams, as they call it nowadays, diversify, right? So in music, what you do is like you do some teaching, you play some gigs, you do some recordings, maybe do some writing. You do a whole range of different things. And, sometimes when you don't have as much recording work coming in, then maybe you've got more gigs coming in, maybe you have some students coming in, and then maybe the gigs dry up because it's that time of the year or whatever. And then, and then you've got maybe some more teaching work. So it's always like a balancing act, basically. And so I remember when I moved house, moved out of London into about 45 minutes outside of London. But and so it's a new place, and I needed to, I needed to get some wonga coming in, as they say in the UK. And so I got myself an agent, and I basically started accumulating guitar students. And as it turned out, I was actually quite good at that. And before I knew it, my timetable was full. Like literally, I was teaching every afternoon, Monday to Friday, and even Saturdays. And I really got to the point pretty quickly, maybe within sort of 8 months or something, I got to the point where I couldn't take on any more students. And so, and then the question was like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? I mean, I can't take on any more students because I haven't got the time. So I literally maximized the potential on that. And then you really only have two options then. You can either raise your prices quite dramatically, let's say double your prices, you're going to lose a whole lot of students, no doubt, right? Let's say you lose half of your students. But what you're actually gaining is half of your time. So now you have a lot of time, you're still making the same amount of money, but you've got more time to then either add more students or do other things in order to, increase your income. And so this is one option you have. You can basically raise your prices, and yes, like you said earlier, you're going to lose some clients, but you're going to gain new ones, and these are going to be very different clients from the ones that you've, and eventually what's going to happen is over time, you're going to sort of, what's the word? You're going to replace your existing client base with this new type of client, and overall, your income is going to increase, right? And then you're going to get to the point where actually you might move from a side hustle type of business where it's just some extra money that you make. It doesn't really matter because maybe you have a main job and that's your main income, and maybe you just, like I think we all started like that. I remember, earning some extra money so I could buy a new lens or a new camera body. Photography is an expensive hobby. Like, it's like this stuff costs real money. So, and then, the other option that I had in guitar lesson terms is, I figured, well, I can either raise my prices or I could get other people to teach for me. And so that's what I did at the time. I figured, okay, well, I can hire another guitar teacher to pick up some of those students that I can't teach. But then I very quickly thought like, but if I can hire another guitar teacher, I might as well hire a drum teacher and a bass guitar teacher and a singing teacher and a drum teacher, whatever. And then you very quickly start thinking along the lines of a school. That sounds pretty much like a school to me, like where you have a drum teacher and And so then I figured, okay, well, so all right, I guess I'm setting up a school then. I guess that's what I'm doing. And then I set up a school and I ran that school for 12 years.
Oh wow!
And and then before I knew it, I think within the first year it went from 0 to like 350 students, and I had like 16 employees at some point, and it just went nuts in the first year.
Wow.
It was crazy. And I really wasn't prepared for that. I knew how to teach and I knew how to play the guitar, but I really didn't know how to run a business. And this is like, this is the other thing that I learned on the job. And this is what you mentioned earlier about learning stuff on the job. That is so important.
Right.
Because you just, you just never know what's around the corner. And for me, I certainly didn't. At no point when I was at music college did I think I'm going to run a business where I'm going to have to deal with like taxes and salaries,
right?
All of the kind of stuff that really doesn't have anything to do with playing music, but has a lot to do with running a business.
Right?
I had zero idea. Like, VAT, sales tax, for instance, they call it over here. Value-added tax.
Yeah.
What the heck is that even?
Right.
How do you deal with like the inland revenue? Like, well, no idea. And it was a very steep learning curve, as it would be for anyone getting into that kind of thing. But yeah, it's super important to put yourself into that situation, and when you come up against a problem, you figure it out. And the next time you come across the same problem, you already know the solution.
Yes,
so you had to figure it out in the past. That's the important part. I don't. Did you have a similar experience to that?
Absolutely. So some of the events that I used to do, I actually have. What I wanted to try was printing on site. And in Oklahoma, if you sell anything that is a digital download, then you don't have to worry about your value-added tax. But the instant that it's a tangible product, then that applies. So that was where I've got thrown into that. Was I showed up to an event as a vendor, which normally I was not really considered a vendor. I was their photographer. I was providing a service. And as soon as I pulled a trailer full of printers and computers and stuff, onto the event venue, and offered a print as a product, instantly this person walks up with this stack of paperwork and says, "Here, you need to fill this out." And and now instantly you're paying, or you're adding a percentage of tax to every product that you sell. And so that was that introduction to that. And I was like, what is that? What is this? I take photos. What is this for?
Yeah, exactly. And also why? Like, why?
Right.
Why do I charge the transaction? Like, what is going on? But, I mean, it's the same thing like with, I remember, so here in the UK, the way it works is it's basically, you don't pay VAT, or you don't have to charge VAT if you're under a certain income threshold. And I think at the time it was like 65 grand or something like that per year. It's gone up a little bit, maybe 75. I'm not actually sure exactly what it is, but it's in that sort of region. But when you hit that threshold, you're going to have to register for VAT. So you got to be a VAT registered business. And I remember, when I started the music school, never in a million years did I think that we were going to hit that threshold ever, actually, let alone in the first year. But it became very apparent after about 6 months that we were like really on the trajectory to hitting that like within month 10 or something. And it's like, shoot, you're gonna have to register, otherwise you're gonna be in deep trouble.
Right.
But also what that immediately meant was that at the time, so the VAT here was 17.5%. So basically, all of us from today to tomorrow, you're going to have to raise your prices by just under 20%. That's a lot, And you just go, well, but the reality is that for things like music lessons, for example, there's a ceiling in how much you can charge. Because there's lots of competitions around, there's like anything from the dude who's teaching guitar out of his bedroom, to other schools and all the rest of it. So there's sort of a ceiling to how much you can charge, and so at the same time, you can't absorb that amount of tax. You can't just say, "Well, I'm just going to take a 17.5% pay cut." You can't. Yeah. So it's really tricky, like making that transition from being non VAT registered to being VAT registered over in the case. Like that can potentially be really quite tricky, and then it's, it seems to work slightly differently in different places around the world, obviously, and the percentages vary. I know that a lot of states in the U.S. have considerably less sales tax than we have in the U.K. I think now it's actually 20% over here, so which is like,
wow,
yeah. But it's a really good example for something that you have to wrap your head around if you don't have a business degree, and yet you're starting out on a journey, and maybe you get to the point where all of a sudden these things become important.
Right.
But also they're just mistakes you make once, then you get stung. And then you're gonna try and don't make that mistake ever again.
Yeah.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
So how was that?
Go ahead.
Sorry, how was that for you? Like, making that sort of transition into actually running it as a business rather than just a little side hustle. Was that for you?
Oh yeah, and it's still a learning curve for me. I'm a horrible slow learner when it comes to running a business. I feel like I still have no idea what I'm doing. But I mean, and it's like you said, you stumble through it, you something jumps up, and then, sometimes it's an expensive, painful lesson, and then you learn that and you move on, whether that has to do with taxes like that or dealing with an employee. I mean, I've never really had, a steady employee. I've had contracted work where I've had to do, tax forms and stuff for that, but I've never really had someone on steady where I was having to. That's another thing. The responsibility of providing an income, of making an income for another person or another family, or that's a whole different concept in my mind anyway. Because when I'm on my own, it's, I can be willing to, live on ramen noodles or whatever, for a certain amount of time if things aren't exactly going well. But if I was taking on an employee and having to think about their needs, I don't necessarily want them to have to involuntarily live on ramen noodles because the business isn't exactly doing well. So, it's a whole different ball of wax.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I've experienced that firsthand. I had 16 employees at one point. And,
wow.
Any business goes through, peaks and troughs. Like sometimes it's going well. Sometimes it's, you're going through a low. This may be not necessarily something to do with the way that the business is actually performing, or it may just simply be a cash flow issue. And so
right.
in education in the UK, it's kind of tricky because you're paying your employees on a monthly basis, but traditionally you're charging your clients on a half-termly or termly basis. So a half term is about 6 weeks. So it's basically, so you're kind of charging around school terms over here rather than on a monthly basis, which is kind of weird. And I'm not sure whether it's the same elsewhere, but this is certainly very often what it's like over here in the UK. So you get these discrepancies in cash flow, where you come to the end of the month and you've got to pay salaries, and you've got the money coming in 2 weeks' time,
right?
Because you've invoiced and everything. That's no good to you right now because you've got to pay your employees now. You've got to pay the salaries now, and so a lot of the times, quite often over the course of like 12 years or whatever, quite often I was in a situation where I had to pay my employees first, and I'm not taking any salary because it's just not in the business right now, and everybody else getting paid except for me. That is, unfortunately, is the responsibility of the boss or the director at that point, is to be that safety stop, basically. It's like there's no way that you cannot pay your employees, because if you don't pay your employees, they're not going to work for you, and if you don't have anybody to work for you, don't have a business, and then everything goes to pot.
Right.
Also not something I accounted for when I started this thing, because it's like I thought, this is great, I'm going to make money, and then I realized, I'm the last one to get paid around here. This isn't panning out the way I wanted it. But that's how it is. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
it's a really tricky thing. So think twice before you take on any other employees.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's something I've thought extensively about, because I've been in that situation where I thought, man, if I had someone to handle X, where I didn't have to touch that, then I could do, I could bring in more volume of work, or I could do this, I could do that. But at the same time, it's like, well, I think if that need was more constant, all of the time, then that, if I thought it would pay for someone else to do that, then that would be fine. But when you hit a 2-month, 3-month stretch where there's nothing, and, being a small town photographer, I mean, I am about a 20-minute drive at the very minimum to get to anything. And to get to a sizable city, I am an hour from one and an hour and a half from another. So the population of the nearest town to me is about 2,500 people-ish, something like that. So even, and I'm not by any stretch the only photographer in the area that's interested in doing the kind of work that I do. So I can't just do one thing. And you were talking about being diverse in what you do. If I have to do it, I'll go shoot real estate photos. I'll do family photos, senior photos. I'll do the odd wedding, even though weddings to me are like a war zone. but I'll do a wedding every now and then. I'll do basically whatever it takes. And, as a lot of small town photographers, and I think this is true to an extent, we pretty much have to shoot everything. I'll shoot the ball games. I'll show up and photograph, whether it's baseball, softball, football, basketball, whatever. Do sports team photos. I just did a little, girls basketball, just their team photos, where basically I do their group shot and then take individual photos of each one of them and have like basically just an order form where their parents take it home, fill it out, that sort of thing. Whatever I've got to do to keep that coming in. And so it's kind of, I don't even know what I would be hiring when I tried to hire somebody to do what,
Yeah. Well, that's a really great point. Actually, in fact, you made a number of really great points there. One is, so when you're, especially, depending on where you are, whether you're in a big city, or whether you're out in the prairie somewhere, or even when you're in a suburban area, like I am, I'm not really in London. I'm in a suburban area of suburban London, if that makes any sense. I'm at the very outer fringes of London, like literally.
Right. Okay.
5-minute drive from here. It's like beautiful countryside. And then, 15-minute drive in the other direction, you're really in urban London, so I'm sort of really at the very edge of it. And it means that to a large degree, what I do is fairly typical for like a small town photographer. As you described, you're going to have to do a number of different things. Like I remember when I first got into headshots, I thought, oh yeah, headshots. Everybody's talking about headshots. Brilliant. Awesome. I'm going to just drop everything else and all I'm going to do is headshots. That, like where I am, that doesn't work, as I had to find out the hard way, because if you're in the center of London, yeah. I mean, that's like so many businesses and like, hardly anybody lives in central London. It's all professionals, right? So yeah, headshots.
Right.
I'm sure you can make a brilliant living just shooting headshots. Where I am, not so much, right? Because your hardcore professionals are not really going to travel an hour on the tube or on the train to come out where I am just to have the headshot done, because on the way they're probably passing 100 really great headshot photographers that are much closer, and much more efficient, for those kind of people. So really, out here, I'm going to have a variety of different things, and A number of things that you hear all the time are absolutely true. Like the specialist can charge more than the generalist. Hear that all the time.
Yeah.
It's true, but you can't necessarily be a specialist all of the time. I often sort of I think of it like this. If you want to be a specialist for something, you probably have to move yourself to a place where that specialism makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So if I wanted to be 100% headshot photographer, special factors or whatever, I would have to basically move into town. That's what I would have to do, right?
Right.
I don't want to do that, though, because I quite like it where I am. We've got lakes, there's trees.
Yeah.
You can actually see green once in a while. It's
right.
It's it's nice. I like it here. So I don't want to move. Okay. So then I have to take into account that just doing headshots isn't really gonna work. So I'm gonna have to be more of a generalist. And the way that I've always approached it is, I do a number of things, and then I look at what I do, and I look at what brings in what amount of revenue, and then I think, well, what's a good example? So a good example would be property photography, industrial photography, and let's say birthday parties. Right. So I have some clients. Construction. That's what I mean. Construction photography. So I have some clients who are in the construction industry. So when I did that for a few years. I did a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then I looked at my end of year kind of accounts, and I basically figured, okay, well, actually, the construction photography brings in this much money per job. The birthday parties bring in that much money. And overall, the construction jobs actually pay a lot more per job. And there's a ton of construction going on around here, right?
Right.
So I kind of figured, well, actually, my energy is better spent focusing on potential construction clients than it is on birthday party clients. Because to make the same amount of money, I need to find considerably more birthday party clients, than construction clients. So if I only have a limited amount of time to market my business, I might want to spend that time on something that actually brings in more revenue than not, right? There's one caveat though. If in your business, if you're the kind of person who loves shooting birthday parties, if that's your thing and you just absolutely love it, then by all means, just go and do that, right? Nobody can say don't do that. If that's, do you know what I mean? If you love weddings, if that's like really your thing, you love the whole thing, then by all means, just shoot weddings, 100%, right? Everybody gets married, no matter if you live in a country. If that is the thing you want to do, perfect. But if not, then it may actually make sense to focus on the one part that, or the two or three different bits of your portfolio that actually brings in the money, and then just really focus on that. As the other thing that you mentioned is like, okay, so when do you hire somebody to do work for you, especially if you're not necessarily always 24/7, 7 days a week, 12 months. I can't even think how many weeks are there in a year? 54, whatever.
56 or I don't know, something like
that. This is not a maths podcast.
Math is hard.
Yeah. So if like all year round, if you're not necessarily in a position, where you could always afford to employ somebody, you might want to think, okay, well, now, and actually, I'm just gonna wrap this into a very typical situation. Here's the thing, a typical situation for any solopreneur, like a one-man band type of business, is to think that, in the beginning, when you don't have a lot of work, you have the time to do a lot of marketing. So you can get in touch with companies, potential clients, put your name out there, create, social media collateral, like post here, there, and everywhere, and create videos and all that. You can do that because you get the time to do it. Then, let's say your marketing activities show results and you actually land some clients, and now you're going to start doing work. Awesome. And so now you're busy doing the work. But if you're just a one-man person or one-woman person, you're now doing the work, but now you don't have time to market yourself. And so you're constantly going through this flip-flop sort of situation where you're flipping between having a lot of work to having not a lot of work, because whilst you're working, you couldn't do the marketing. And then when you're marketing, you're not obviously working, but you're then getting the work in order to then work and not being able to do the marketing. And so you're flipping, you're flip-flopping back and forth between these two cycles. Either you're really busy or you're not busy at all. And,
right. Yeah.
And that's really the problem, And in an ideal world, like you think like, oh, well, but if I had somebody who does you either love doing marketing or you don't, right?
Right.
If you don't love the marketing, like the getting on the phone and calling potential clients, then it makes sense to hire somebody who can do that whilst you're out doing the shooting, right? Same thing with editing. Yeah. Like if you're the kind of photographer who doesn't like editing, well, hire an editor or find another way, dare I say it, AI, whatever it may be, right? to do the editing, to do the editing for you. If you don't like that, then that's cool. If you love the editing, well, maybe hire somebody else to do the shooting for you, whatever it may be, right? But the problem is always like, okay, yeah, it's like you said, you're often not necessarily in a position where you can like full-time employ somebody to do that all of the time. And then, you might have to think of like different solutions for that. Maybe you can hire somebody part-time. Maybe you can hire somebody on a freelance type of basis, a couple of hours.
Yeah, and I've had the best success so far doing stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are people who run businesses in a sort of self-employed freelance type of way that basically consists of doing the marketing, getting on the phone, calling potential clients. Telemarketing is what they used to call it. I don't know if they're still, they probably still call it telemarketing. Whatever it is, if you're like, if you can find somebody who basically will get on the phone to make connections with potential new clients, and you can get them, even if they only do it for 2 hours a week, that's still better than not doing it.
Right. Yeah.
And then things become a lot more affordable than necessarily thinking of like hiring somebody full time. And I often, in my experience, think that people sort of shirk away from that idea because they're immediately thinking, oh, I'm going to have to employ somebody like full time to,
right.
And that's not necessarily necessary all the time.
Yeah. And that's that's an insecurity thing, it's kind of it's a insecurity and a scarcity kind of a reaction, which I'm certainly guilty of that. And I think really you hit the nail on the head. We create our own boom bust cycle when we do that, that is 100% true. That, when you have all the time of the world, of course you're going to be scratching and clawing to try to get as many clients as you possibly can. And then all of a sudden you have, I am way guilty of doing that. Then you get so busy, you don't ever want to look at Instagram again or whatever, or pick up the phone or call, you call it telemarketing. The word that came to mind was cold calling.
Yes. Cold calling. That's what I was looking for. Yeah.
Exactly. I hate doing that. So definitely having somebody to handle stuff like that would be fantastic. And I've done, some things where I've had somebody on, not even necessarily part-time or freelance, like you were saying, that have done something like that before. And I've had, it's kind of a revolving door. You're going to, and that's the other thing is, whether it's hiring or even vouching for somebody to be hired, like that's always tough is sorting through enough people, because you're going to get some people that are not going to click with you well, that are just not necessarily going to work out. So there is going to be some pain to go through there before you find somebody that really clicks well with your business and you personally enough to get that to work out. So there's also that challenge to overcome. But yeah, I definitely understand. Like, I totally agree with a lot of what you said there.
it's really tricky in the beginning also, to, like, again, we're talking about like that first, so the beginning phase when you're first starting to get into into photography as a business, where you just don't know what's going on. Maybe, you haven't necessarily got a business degree. It's funny this, my kids, my youngest daughter in particular, like whenever when she was first born, right? So, at the time, like I said, was a full-time musician, and her mom was a vocalist, like a singer. And so people used to say, oh, it's going to be amazing. She's going to be an amazing musician. Her mom's a singer, her dad's a guitarist. It's going to be great. And I always used to think, like, I hope she becomes an accountant, because that's really useful.
Right.
We need an accountant. That's what we need. We don't need another, like, breadless musician in the family. Like, study accountancy. That's your business or something like that. Oh, that's gonna be useful. But it's true. I mean, it's a difficult period, to get in, like, to get through to running business, and especially if you don't have any of those prior knowledge, it's important to just get some. I mean, there's so many resources nowadays that just weren't around 15 years ago. Because of the internet and courses that you can do. The information that you can get hold of now is so much easier. When I first started doing my tax return, when I first went self-employed as a musician, I remember, like, in the late 90s or early 2000s, you couldn't even do your tax return online. You had to go out and fill out a paper return. I remember, like, being on the phone to the Inland Revenue, like, to the helpline for hours, like, going like, but this doesn't make any sense. Like, if I fill in this box, I have to go where? Like, what do I need to put in there? It was complicated. Now, it's all online. It's actually dead easy to do your own tax return, in the UK, at least it is. It just automatically guides you through it. You fill in one thing, it automatically takes you to the next relevant box.
Right.
It's like, honestly, you don't need half a brain to be able to do your own tax returns. It's so much easier now. But back in the day, oh man, it was a nightmare. And of course, I'd always do it like, 5 days before the annual deadline, and then everybody would be on the phone to the helpline, and so you could never get through. God,
yeah.
Man, again, something I've learned: do your tax return in time, in case something goes wrong. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult to to foresee those things, and then once you're in it, of course, this is the other problem. Like, often you only start dealing with those problems once you actually encounter them,
Right.
That's the thing.
That circles back to, don't just hone your craft in your basement for 10 years and think that you're going to come out and be extremely successful as a business in photography. Like, get out here and learn the hard lessons. You can either learn them now or you can learn them later, but you're still going to have to go through it. I mean, it doesn't really matter unless you're taking a business course in the basement while you're doing your photography, while you're learning your photography skills at the same time, which there's going to be unforeseen circumstances that you're going to run into. So yeah, I think that ties back in perfectly with, all of it in general, really, where it comes to practicing, on the job. And that doesn't just go to your photography skills. That is very, very relevant to your business knowledge. Is, if it takes getting out here and falling on your face, do it. I mean, you're gonna have. That's the thing. I mean, you are gonna make mistakes. You have to make mistakes in order to learn from them. Yeah.
Yeah. It's this really interesting thing. And it's actually, let me come to this point. There's something else you said that was really quite very true, actually, for anyone practically, because you said earlier, you're not the only photographer that shoots the kind of stuff that you shoot in your area, and this is true for it's true for anyone, and regardless of what it is, unless you have some brand new idea of something that nobody's ever done before, which I can't really imagine, then there's going to be competition out there, and then the question is, what are you going to do about that? Because it's very easy to say, oh, well, I'm not going to shoot headshots because there's already like 5 other headshot photographers in my area. Or I'm not going to shoot weddings because there's already, 3 other wedding photographers on my road. You know?
Right.
That's not really a reason to not do it. I always think like, well, because people always say like, oh yeah, I can't do that because the market is oversaturated. Well, if there are 5 wedding photographers in your little town, that tells me that there's most likely going to be a lot of weddings going on in your area. So
Exactly.
potentially this may not be the worst thing to do. The question is just, how do you differentiate yourself from the other wedding photographers? You know, and that's often where the trick is, really.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that I've latched onto, is that I'm not the world's best when it comes to posing someone, and I'm not I'm not the greatest ever at anything really, but something that I noticed that's not done very much in my area is that a lot of my local photographers shy away from using flash. They don't use flash. They don't seem to be interested in using any kind of off-camera strobe or anything like that. They're very much into the what do you call it, light and airy. And they all look the same. Like almost all the photographers in my area, their work looks, I can't tell them apart. If I scroll through a photography group that's a local photography group, I can't tell whose photo belongs to who. And that's something that I did pretty early on, was that immediately I went and bought an off-camera flash. I bought a strobe and started learning how to use it. So that's something that I've leaned into hard to a fault almost. I mean, like I've done it to the point where like off-camera flash is like 90% of my personality now. So that's just an example. I'm not saying everybody needs to do what I just did, but I mean, that's just one thing that you can do where your work looks substantially different. I'm not even saying necessarily that it's better. I'm just, maybe someone likes that more than they like what someone else is providing. It's not really a testament to mine is better. It's just that they might not like that. They might like mine. It's, and everybody has their own preferences. But if you're exactly like everybody else as far as your work that you're producing, then all you're competing on at that point is price. And I'm not really interested. I'm not really interested in competing with anybody just on price alone. I think how I work and what my work looks like needs to at least be somewhat different. And like I said, not necessarily is it going to be better, but it's at least going to be different.
Yeah, different is really important. I did an exercise the other day, actually, a couple of weeks ago, where I looked at branding photographers in my sort of greater area, basically. And what I found was really interesting, like they really do all look the same. I mean,
yeah,
I mean, branding photography, you would think, like, I mean, in my head, right? Branding photography is basically enhancing a business's brand visually, right?
Yeah.
But if I look at loads of branding photographers in my area, I realize that they make every brand look the same because all the photos look the same. And that's sort of, in my head, kind of missing the point. Surely you want to make brands stand out. So if you shoot a brand or you shoot imagery for a brand, then it doesn't make sense if you make every brand look the same.
Right.
None of this makes any sense to me. So, so I looked at that and I'm thinking like, wow. So obviously what's happening here is there's clearly a very specific trend going on, a fashion, when it comes to branding photography at the moment. And like so many people are latching onto that. And it's like you said, they're completely interchangeable. If you just took all of these photos from all these websites that I looked at, and you basically just put them into one big portfolio, you would not be able to tell, like, these were done by different photographers. They all look the same.
Right.
And it's the light and airy type of a thing, like, I don't know, female business owner, dressed in, like, office attire, in front of either really modern kitchen or some kind of, some kind of like fancy, super modern like office type of a thing. Plain backgrounds, usually very block colors, and that is it. And you're like, wow, flipping heck. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's the same everywhere. It's just unbelievable, So I'm really thinking like, whoa, okay, like this is partial. I mean, branding photography is actually partially what I do, but I don't do that. Like, I don't do any of that, And so, and of course, then in my head, I'm thinking like, oh, maybe I should be doing that. Well, everybody's doing that. Am I missing a trick?
No.
Should I be doing that? Like, it's this sort of, the sense of doubt comes over you. And I think everybody's in that. Like when you first get into the photography business and you look at, and headshots is the same thing.
Right.
It's you immediately think like, maybe I should be doing what everybody. It's the herd mentality, I think, is what it's called. Like where everybody's going in one direction, and you immediately think, oh, maybe I should go in that direction because everybody's going there. And and sometimes, I mean, sometimes you can fail miserably. I'll tell you a story. I failed. I went to Tahoe City. That's right. Years ago, I went to Tahoe City, and I went to a casino. And I know, like, visiting casinos and gambling stuff it's much more common in North America than it is over here in Europe. Where, in North America, it's a pastime. People like doing it. Over here, not so much, right? It's just, I don't know. The European attitude to gambling is usually like, I mean, and I'm very much generalizing, by the way, because there are casinos here and lots of people like, but I'm generalizing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the European attitude is always like, why should I do that? I'm guaranteed to lose money. Does it make any sense?
Right.
Why? Anyway, so, but I found myself in Tahoe City with friends of mine, and they said like, hey, let's spend one night, hitting the casino. Let's see how that goes. And I'm like, okay, cool, that's fine. Yeah, fine. So, but I don't understand any of the games. Like, I don't really understand card games. But roulette, I understood. Right, so I'm like, okay, this makes sense to me. You put some money or some chips like onto a color or a number, and you have a chance of winning or losing. And I figured, well, if I pick a color, then I at least have a 50% chance of winning or no. Right? And there were like maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 other people around that roulette table, and I noticed everybody was putting their chips on, let's say, black, and I thought, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put my chips on red. So anyway, everybody puts the chips on black. I put mine on red. He spins the thing, and I lose. Everybody else wins. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this again because surely there must be a 50% chance of winning. So I'm going to do the same thing again, and this time I have a 50% chance of winning. So I did the same exact thing again. Same thing happened. Everybody puts their chips on one, their money on one color. I choose the other. I lose again. And I'm like, okay, so 3 times lucky, right? So now I have to win because mathematically the odds are in my favor. I did the same thing again. I lost again. And at that point, I thought, like, man, I'm just not cut out for this. The gods don't want me to win at this game.
Right.
I'm gonna have to leave. But it's one of these things like where, good example for, had I just followed the herd mentality, I would have won 3 times. Yeah. Instead, I lost 3 times. So there you go.
Yeah. And absolutely, like when it comes to photography, I've had that thought. I thought, man, am I out of my mind for doing what I'm doing? But then, every now and then, like I'll get that feedback from somebody and something will happen. And, I booked a wedding, last fall. And one of the things that they said was, the hardest thing that we had to do to set this wedding up was finding a photographer. And they said, they all look the same. And they said the only one that stood out in our area was you. There was like everybody else. All of their work looked exactly the same, and it wasn't what we were looking for. And they said, and yours was just totally different than everybody else's. So I was like, cool, And on a grand scale, I'm not that different. I'm just different here.
Yes, exactly.
I'm not doing anything groundbreaking, not even close. I mean, I'm my setup and stuff is very simple when it comes to photographers in general. I mean, when I go to a convention or something, I'm I very much blend into the pack as far as what everybody's work looks like. It's just for some reason right here, that's not so much the case. So it's interesting.
And also, differentiating yourself doesn't necessarily mean creating a different product. Because you can differentiate, you can differentiate, it's a difficult word, differentiate yourself, by doing things differently in terms of, for instance, delivery, or, you could be faster than other people. You could use a different process. A really good example is, passport photos, for example, not really something that I shoot, but you can imagine, for example, different ways of creating passport photos. They'll end up looking exactly the same. They look like passport photo, but you could go into a store and have, somebody shoot your passport photos. We have them on the high street here in the UK. We have them a lot. They're called Snappy Snaps. How's the business Snappy Snaps? I don't know. It's like a chain of like little photo stores. They shoot, they sell frames, they print images, and they also shoot passport photos. That's what they do. So you could do that. You can go into one of those shops and and have your passport photo taken. Or what you can also do is you can go to Costco or like any supermarket, and there'll be a machine. There'll be a booth, and you sit in there. You put, nowadays you pay with your phone or whatever, and, you smile at the mirror, you follow the instructions, the thing flashes a couple of times, and, it spits out 4 or 6 or whatever passport photos. Now, they're going to look exactly the same, actually. White background, your face on it, the right format, print it, so great. So the end product is pretty much the same.
Right.
And with passport photos, we're not really differentiating. We're not competing on quality, really. It's a passport.
No.
It goes into your passport.
Yeah.
We might compete on price, but I've noticed that they cost approximately about the same. I deal with a lot of passport photos because my kids have like, my wife's got a UK passport and a Canadian passport. I have a German passport. My daughter has a German and a UK passport, and my stepkids have Canadian passport. It's like passports coming out of our house, basically. Yeah. And so it's like we're constantly having to like bring new passports and getting passport pictures for this and that and the other. Actually, something I'll be doing later on this week as well. Going to yet another embassy, getting another passport done for some kid, right?
No.
So yeah. Anyway, so something I deal with a lot. And I've noticed that, they don't necessarily, they don't compete on price, like the company that runs the machines and the shop that has a person sitting in there doing passport photos, right? It strikes me, though, that the business running these machines over time makes hugely more profit than the people running shops, employing people to work in the shops, blah, blah, paying the rent and the business taxes and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to the guy who came up with the idea of making machines that take passport pictures and then just place them in every godforsaken supermarket there is.
Yeah.
Or shopping mall. That's right. Like, I went to the local mall here and I saw this. There's like, I think there's 6 of these booths back to back. And I'm thinking, I barely ever see a person in one of these booths, let alone 6. How can it be? But of course, over time, it's profitable because they don't have to employ people.
Right.
To take those pictures, the damn thing's a machine. That's like, over time, this works. So, so differentiating yourself or, competing with the competition doesn't necessarily mean creating a different product.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It means
That's something that we deal with a lot with our events, like barrel racing. We're going to take the same photo. Like if you, I mean, the only difference is that we may strobe an arena or we may not strobe an arena, and that just depends on what the lighting situation is like. But generally, when I set up on barrel 2 and I get a horse coming in around that barrel and I take that head-on shot, mine's going to look exactly like yours is going to look, exactly like the next person's going to look. So there's no differentiating on the basis of like what our work is going to look like for the most part. I mean, yeah, someone may just have a skill level that they're slightly better at timing, getting the feet placement of the animal where they need to be, something like that. But in general terms, we're going to take the same photos at a barrel race. It's a barrel race. They're going to do the exact same thing every time. They're not going to, halfway through the run, break out into a rendition of Oklahoma or whatever, they're going to do the same thing. So the way that we have done this, and my friend Tracy has been amazing at developing this, is her software, her method of sales is how she has done it. Because most of the time when a photographer goes to a barrel race, they will shoot all of their photos. They will take all of their photos home. They will spend the next week sorting all of those photos, and then they will reach out, or they will list them on a website like some hosting website like ShootProof or like whatever. And the contestants will be able to get on their website and purchase them a week after the event. Well, in our world here, a week after the event, you've been to 3 more races and you've been in front of 3 more photographers, and your mind is not even on that race anymore. Unless something spectacular happened, you won the race or you made a faster time than you've ever ran before, you're probably not going to go back. Or unless maybe you're trying to sell the horse and you're trying to get certain photos, but the circumstances of you purchasing a photo a week after the event become much more specific. So you really want that moment where everybody's happy about what they just did, and it's that impulse buy. You want that everybody to be excited about being there. And so what she's done is she's developed a software that you basically get the Excel spreadsheet of the draw, and you put that into a computer, and we have put the folder change on our camera on a custom button. So when someone runs into the pin, we instantly switch folders in the camera on the memory card. And so all of their photos go into their own folder, and then we switch again when the next runner comes in. And then they usually, at barrel races, they'll do 5 runs, and then they rework the arena. They drag the arena. And so while they're dragging the arena with a tractor, we'll pull the card out of the camera. We put it in the computer. The software matches the draw sheet to the folders, instantly ingests all those photos, creates small JPEGs, watermarks them, uploads them to the website, and it sorts them by their name. So now they can get on, we've got viewing computers there at the event, or they can get on their phone or whatever they want to do, and they can see their photos under their name. And it's usually live before they can get their horse back to their stall or their trailer. Like it's very quick. And then they order based on a proof, which is a small JPEG that the software created. And then we can edit, retouch, we can, crop, do whatever we need to do to that photo after the fact. So it does a lot of things. It gets them in front of the client or potential client much quicker. You're not doing unnecessary editing. You're not going home and editing every photo, whether you think you're going to sell it or not, and putting it on your website. You're only editing, or I say editing, retouching on demand. So you don't have to adjust, crop, do everything to every single photo that you shoot. You just do it to whatever you sell. So, I mean, that's been amazing. And it allows, even if usually we have a computer operator and a photographer that will work in pairs, at these events, but it's not beyond possibility that you can do it one person, operate the computer in between drags and do all of the photography yourself. But it's been great. And I think, that is going to be a big edge, for somebody like her moving forward. And I'm not necessarily looking to go out and make an event photography business, and spearhead that. But, I don't mind doing them once in a while. I just don't know that I want to do it every single weekend. I did that for 2 years and don't really care about it. But yeah, that's a way that she's differentiating herself, is through this software, getting them in front of the client quickly. And her turnaround times are great because she doesn't have to edit every single thing. And when she leaves an event, other than her orders, she's done, and that's the same case. Anytime I help her, when we leave, it's over. We're done when we leave. So it's great.
That is so important. These sort of tweaks can really make a massive difference. What you tell me really, it reminds me of two things. One is, anybody who's ever been to some kind of, what do you call it? Like, something like Disneyland or Disney World or something like that. You go on a ride. Let's say you're on the roller coaster. That thing snaps a picture of you screaming, at some point. Yeah. And by the time you leave, you can already see those pictures on a screen, and then you can make the impulse buy to buy it. And they're usually overpriced. It's like ridiculous how expensive they are. But,
right.
And it's, it's like, I would, I look at the picture and go like, oh, I look crap. My hair's all over the place,
Right.
And I would normally walk past it, but of course, I'm there with like 3 kids, and they go like, I want to buy it.
Right.
I think I bought a picture once, so that's one thing. But the other thing, the other thing I do quite regularly is I shoot boxing matches. And so what happens, there's sort of, it's called ultra wide color boxing. I should really know this. I've done this for years. It's like a charitable thing. So basically, people sign up for this. It's like a bit like, it's like one of these event things where, you can like, if you would, it's like one of these experience things where, you can either experience racing in a drag car race or like in a Formula One car, or you go up in a hot air balloon or something. So this thing is basically where you can experience being in a boxing ring or in a cage fight. Okay. For those weird people who think that's a great way. But I know it's nuts. But there's a charitable thing as part of it, because they raise a lot of money for a cancer charity, and really tens of thousands of pounds. And so the way this works is they basically get 8 weeks of free training, right? So they train with a professional boxing coach, for instance, they train. The whole event is set up like a pro level boxing event. There's a proper ring, professional referees and judges and all the rest of it. They do the whole thing. And in the blue corner, it's the whole shebang. Yeah, it's the whole shebang. Like, the tuxedo and really the shiny shoes and the whole thing. So they've got professional boxing announcers and all the rest of it. And it's a black tie event. And often, there's an audience of up to like 4,000. Sometimes they have two rings going on in parallel. So it'd be like 2 fights going on. They've got the big digital display boards where the fighters' headshots pop up and their stats. It's done. It's done really well. And they sell seats at tables. I don't even know how much they go for, but a large proportion of that money goes to charity anyway. So, and then, and so what happens is there's always a photographer ringside, and very often it's me, and I shoot the whole fight, right? And that's usually about anywhere between 20 and 30 fights in a row per ring. Okay, so it's a lot of participants. They do 3 rounds each, and then the winner is crowned or whatever. And so I shoot the event. And so what happens is I shoot a fight. And after that fight, I'll basically put my SD card into a card reader, which is connected to a laptop. Now, that laptop basically automatically drags the images from the SD card and sends them to the main computer. And there's a guy sitting at the main computer with a printer. And what I do is they basically, out of all the shots that I took of this particular fight, they'll pick 5 shots of the blue contestant and 5 shots of the red contestants. And they create, they print them, and they create these picture frames that have like the sort of, the shiny logo of the competition in the middle, and then like 5 really cool shots of that particular fighter. And they sell that for something like, I think they're about £90. It's about $110, $120, right?
Okay.
And people can basically buy these frames at the fight. Like not a week later, they don't order them. They literally produce them right there and then. And of course, they make a decent amount of money in setting these frames, right? And of course, you have the ring girls running around, like, after each fight with a sample, to hold it up to the audience, and they go like, they promote the fact. And then, people will come up to the printer booth basically, and they'll buy one of those frames. Great. And then the rest of the other 3,000 pictures that I took at this particular event, right? They'll then go online, and they're then available to purchase after the fact via, I think it's Shootproof actually is what I use. Mm-hmm. So I've always thought like, well, that's all well and good, but here's the thing: the guy who makes the frames, basically per fight, has to quick edit 10 shots. 5 for the red corner, 5 for the blue corner. That's all he does. And I know there's a lot of time pressure. These fights don't last very long, and it's about high pressures of a fight, right? But that's all I did. I edit all the other shots that I deliver. And I think I deliver per event, I probably deliver anywhere between, if it's a short event, probably 700 shots. If it's a longer event, about 900 shots, something like that, right? I have to edit them. And of course, I've come up with a workflow that allows me to edit them really quickly. But nevertheless, I just spend quite a lot of time editing those. Now, then they go up on the website, and I know from talking to the guys, I know that they really don't really sell that many after the fact. So there are not very many people that go onto the website days after the fight in order that there's just not many of those, right? And that's because the whole thrill and the excitement of the actual event is over. It's done.
Right.
The team or the guy that's lost is going to be even more unlikely to buy pictures, right? Maybe the guy who won, maybe his family, maybe, but not. Still is after the event. They're probably nursing their injuries, I guess, at that point.
Yeah.
Still trying to get the blood, stop the blood from flowing out. Whatever they do.
Right.
Plus difficult to look at a screen when you've got ice packs on your eyes all the time.
Right.
But and so I always thought like, well, they're really missing a trick here, because what you really want is some kind of mechanism, some kind of app, right? That you can basically say, okay, after that fight, you just scan this QR code, and it'll take you to this app or page or whatever, where all of these images are, and you can order them right now, right here and now. And these are like the images that have come from I'm taking the SD card out and putting them in a computer anyway. These files are already in the ether, they're already in the air. Why aren't they coming through to some kind of app, some kind of, thing where they can be accessed immediately? And here's the thing. And I know the ultra-wide color boxing thing, these sort of events happen in North America as well, but they're very, very popular here in the UK. And they always go along with large quantities of alcohol. People get freaking hammered at those fights. Hammered, man. It is, the Brits like to drink, but this is like it's just like a prime. I don't know if it's the audience, the type of audience that's drawn to these kind of, I don't know. But man, people get hammered. I mean, they get hammered to the point where there's, of course, ultra high security, as you can imagine. There's sort of fights, and there's lots of, like, there's medical staff. It's very well organized in that respect. But I mean, the amount of times that I've seen fights in the audience break out when they don't agree with the referee's decision, or because they're all
oh wow,
right? I mean, it's pretty rough and ready. I'm lucky that I'm behind like I'm behind like sort of safety cordons and stuff like that, so I'm perfectly safe. I'm literally I'm at the ropes. I'm literally right close up. Often I'm hanging into the ring, when I'm hanging over the ropes or something, and I'm shooting people close ups and whatnot. But the boxers don't worry me. It's the audience that worry me, because these people get pissed, man. It's just it's hilarious. But it also means it's going to be very easy for them to pull the trigger on paying money for photos. Like, this is the state you want them to be in. They're going to buy these damn photos right there. Yeah. Not 3 days later when they've cured their hangover.
Yeah.
Not then. Right there. And I've always thought, like, if somebody comes up with a system where they can basically access these files right there, I think they could probably actually stop doing the prints, because they're going to make so much more money in, like, the instant gratification of buying those photos. Like, do you know what I mean? Or maybe they can do both, but and you don't need anybody, like, you don't need any other bodies,
right?
So this is always the thing I'm thinking, like, man, this is if I was tech savvy, I would develop something like that, but I can barely type.
Right? Yeah. I mean, that's basically what Tracy's done. Is she's built that, and it will work for. I mean, it would totally work for that. Because all you have to be able to do is just change folders in your camera, and I've yet to see a camera that you couldn't. The most I've had to do is like 3 button clicks, because you've had to do like a my menu and like put the folder change in that and put the my menu on a custom button, so you had to go there. But that was like the most complicated thing that I've seen, which is nothing. And just being able to swap folders, and you basically just have a set of fields in this software that you would, say what the event name was, what day it was, if it was a multiple day event, whatever information that you want to add to the file name of each photo, and you can put it in those fields. And then you basically put the whichever. So I guess in that case, you could do the fight. You could do, this person versus this person in that field, and then you would just come down whichever fight you were doing. You would just set, and then every time you shot a new fight, then you would just change folders in the camera, and then it would go out that way. So yeah, I mean, that would totally work for that.
Yeah, exactly. It's because it would be pretty simple, because you've got, even if you have a multi-ring event, you have a photographer per ring. You have to, because you can't really cover two rings.
Yeah.
So it'd be like ring 1, fight 1.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, you'd have both opponents in the same folder anyhow, because obviously very often they're both in the picture. So you would literally just be fight. Ring 2, fight 6. That's it.
Yeah. And there's even an arena selector on the software, because we shoot multiple arenas if we have a multiple arena barrel race. So it'd be just like having a multiple ring fight. And there's even a team there. It's called a team selector or team function, because one of the events that we've done with it is team roping, where you have 2 guys. So basically what that does is you put the names in and you use the team. So anytime someone searches one of the names, then all of the photos that have that person in them would still come up through their multiple fights. There's a way that you can do that. I'm not as familiar with the team function, but that's a possibility. Like, you could still do something like that. But even if you just did it by fight, it would still get them close enough.
Yeah. So you see, I mean, for these sort of events, there always, there's potential solutions that will differentiate you from the way that other people are doing it. And this is like, this is really where You compete on service or speed, or
absolutely.
What's the word? Or function rather than on price. I think price is always the last thing you want to compete on. In fact, if you can do something faster than somebody else, that's actually worth more money because you're saving somebody time.
Yeah.
And so you can potentially even charge more because you can do something in like instantly while somebody else might take, 3, 4, 5 days to turn that around. And that's always,
Oh yeah.
And
I get team shoots for, youth sports, quite often, and I'm not the cheapest one, but I can print in-house, and they don't wait. I mean, I can turn a team around in a couple of days. So, and they know that. So once you do one or two in word of mouth spreads on that, then sometimes you get more than you ask for. But that's kind of what I thought when you were talking about your music teaching business, is that's why I was smiling when you were telling me that, is because you can instantly get more than what you bargained for, depending on how well you serve your clients. So yeah,
absolutely. Andy, it's been a really interesting conversation talking about the business ins and outs. If there was one tip you give somebody who's maybe thinking of turning their photography hobby into a business, what would that one tip be?
Oh my gosh. I only get to say one. I think the most relevant that I've seen my friends and, photographers that wanted to get into it, that the one that they needed to hear more than anything else is probably, don't keep waiting until that you think your work is good enough. Just go and start doing it. Start charging for your work and go for it. Don't wait until you think you're going to be perfect, because you don't know. First of all, like I didn't know what perfect looked like or what it was anyway. Like I might have thought that my work was great, and I look back at it now and it was garbage anyway. So, or at least I that's what I feel. That's just me judging my own stuff. But you're not going to know based on that anyway. Like the Dunning-Kruger effect is real. And it's absolutely real. So just go for it, and, find the sweet spot for your price point and go and don't wait forever to start doing it. I'm not saying quit your job right now and go be a photographer. Obviously not. You wouldn't want to do that. But as far as charging for your work and getting into the business, if that's something that you want to try, go for it.
Okay, folks, that's it for today. It was awesome having Andy on the show. And as always, before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you like. Check out episode 188 with Joe Edelman, where we discuss how wrong the exposure triangle is in this day and age. Or is it? I'm sure you love it. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us continue creating and bringing you more exciting episodes. It really does mean the world to us. And for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, did you know that there's a fully fledged video version over on YouTube with plenty of examples of our guest photography in full Technicolor? All you have to do is go over to YouTube, search for Camerashake Podcast, and you'll be able to watch all past episodes on there. And if you're already on YouTube, well, drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring that bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach a wider audience all over the world. Thank you for listening and watching, and remember, a new episode drops every Thursday, so make sure you mark that in your diary. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.